Welcome to another episode of the Podcast Profits Unleashed podcast, the show where we empower coaches and experts to use podcasting as a powerful tool to drive sales and grow your business. I'm your host, Karen Roberts. After the break, I'm going to be sharing why 90% of coaches fail to launch a podcast that gets an ROI. But first of all, I have Faisal Ensaun, a high performance coach and a business owner. And today we're going to be talking about how to deal with entrepreneurial anxiety. So welcome to the show, Faisal.
So great to be here, Karen. Thank you for having me.
First of all, let's hear a little bit about your backstory and what initially inspired you to help entrepreneurs deal with their anxiety.
I think it wasn't entrepreneurs that was seeking to help in the beginning because I wasn't an entrepreneur to begin with. But my story goes back to a time when I was a young adult, and I remember coming out of a subway station. This is in Toronto region. I remember walking out, going to the side, the corner, see a lot of people walking by. If you've ever been in Toronto, a weekday, I didn't feel really good. And all I feel is that I'm getting sick. I throw up. I see blood on the floor. Not really surprised by that because one of the first thought is, well, you get what you did. That's the effect of what you've been doing for years, abusing your body. In that moment, I think it was the first time where I felt all the pain, emotional, physical, and I felt it all for some odd reason in that moment. As I watched everybody walk by, I also got the sense of my life is passing me by. But in the next moment, what I felt was this sense of peace, this sense of joy, which to my young mind was like, what am I going crazy in this moment? But in retrospect, as I've looked back, I think it was a moment of grace. I believe that was a moment where I personally believe that was God helping me transition out of a very difficult period and where I had become suicidal. I was addicted to all kinds of things from drugs to games to people to going out. Basically, all of them were distractions from the pain that I felt inside. And just to backtrack a little bit, I came from a war-torn country. When I was 17, I came over to Canada from the eastern part of the world. And going through that journey, I never realized until we came here. And ironically, we came to a much safer place. And then when you come there, you're not in survival anymore. Now everything hits you. And now with the culture shock included, I didn't know how to think. I didn't know how to be. And I had the kind of mind who needed to make sense of things. I couldn't make sense of anything. So that led to one thing and after another, a complete loss of identity. And I didn't know who I was. Instead of trying to figure out what to do. To be honest, I didn't know where to look for at the time to look for support or what that support would look like. I went into all sorts of addictions, and that took years to come out of it. And that moment was a defining moment for me. But right after that, it was interesting that I completely changed my life around in the sense that I started working over the weekends. I enrolled myself back in college, and I started shifting some things. I started studying a lot of things from psychology to philosophy, spirituality, history, anything that could give any hints of what the hell went wrong. I came from a good family, even though I never connected the dots around being in survival, but I came from a good family, religious in this sense that we had really good values. Our parents did our best. They were not well off. They were poor, but they always provided for us. They were always there. I had 5 siblings, and they did their best to raise us. But in the process, a lot of things I couldn't process and make sense of. And this incident helped me to go on a completely different journey. And I spent the next decade or so trying to figure out, while doing other things, who I was, what I was trying to do. And then finally, I met one of my first coaches, mentors. And that's a little bit emotional to share right now because he recently passed away just a few days ago.
Very sorry.
Thank you. And after about over a decade of doing this work on my own, I worked with him for about 6 months, and life completely changed. And it was as if somebody took me through over a decade trying to redefine who I was and where I was going through. And that's what pushed me towards the entrepreneurial world. I decided that my path is not with working for others. My path is to create and to find a path towards freedom and to help others around me. And essentially, my path was to figure out what my potential was, who I was, what I wanted to do. And for me, it was like, what would give me the best chance of that is, okay, I need to do what I love, which is understanding myself, understanding my thoughts, understanding who I was, how I showed up, and in the process, also, hopefully, I can help others with that. I didn't know what coaching was, to be honest, and I went to a YouTube video that showed me, speaking of podcasts, it was Brendan Burchard that I saw his videos. You can turn that into a business, anything that you love. I'm like, really? Then I ended up in a conference a few thousand miles away in California. And from there, my journey began, and I was introduced to the world of coaching. I didn't even know it was a field. And from there, I just jumped in, and it had its own struggles, which we can go into. But that was the beginning of my path as an entrepreneur.
Wow. And what a
Mm.
journey. And so you know that, and I'm sure the listeners out there, if they admit it to themselves, there is some anxiety that goes alongside this entrepreneurial path. So you
Mhm.
must have some particular process. How do you help people overcome this anxiety?
Maybe I can approach it in a counterintuitive way. The way I look at it is that, however people frame it as anxiety, we're talking about emotions. Entrepreneurs generally feel anxiety all the time. But I think that's also a defining factor of what they do, because they want to do better. They're constantly growing. They want to do better in their business. They want to do better for their clients. They want to add value to the marketplace, especially if you're a growth oriented entrepreneur, which I am, and a lot of the people I work with are. They tend to be leaders too. They tend to care about what happens with the people around them. They tend to care about their clients. They tend to care about the communities they're building. Whatever, if they're that kind of person, they will naturally have a sense, sort of an anxiety or emotions around it, that am I doing good enough here? I don't think that's a negative thing. I think that's a fuel driving you. But the
Mm,
thing that makes it a negative thing is if it overtakes you, if you've lost control over it. Because in its base form, it's just energy. It's just energy. Where are you going to direct it? If you've learned how to manage it, you will direct it towards the work that's important to you. You will direct it towards the service you're creating in the world. You will direct it towards helping others. You will direct it towards using that energy to learn more, to gain more, to whatever that looks like. But now, if you've mistaken that by something to fix, which most people do because we live in the world of mental health and everything needs to be fixed, I don't think that's real. I think it's one of those things that people have held on to. I think it's a good thing that mental health people are talking about it, but I think it's taken a very crappy turn for a lot of people. It's a lot like, pretty much everybody has become a psychologist. Pretty much everybody has become a therapist. You hear things like, that person is a narcissist. They're not really taught,
mm.
like, they're diagnosing everybody for some specific. Now, how do you know that? And it's usually narcissists who call other, which I find a little
Yeah.
bit like, are you sure you're not projecting that onto others?
Yes,
But
absolutely.
so we live in the world of pop psychology. We live in the world of, let me self that. I can't tell you how many clients will get on a call and they'll say, I think I have ADHD. I think I might have autism. And one of my first questions is, have you been diagnosed by any of those things? Oh no, I think I've self-diagnosed. Everybody's self-diagnosing these days. And
Yeah.
apparently they have a wide range of mental problems that they don't know how to deal with. It might be true. I'm not making fun of people who actually have legitimate challenges there. But most people take something because they know the surface of it, they make it into something bigger. And the problem with the human mind is it's an incredibly powerful tool. It's much more powerful than the computer, the internet, all the phones that you have around you. But the problem, nobody came with an instruction manual around that. In fact, we've done a pretty crappy job in our communities, in our families, in our education system to teach children how their mind works. We'll teach them everything about everything else, but then it's like, it's one of those. I talk about three things that we're not taught in education systems a lot about, or by most people around us. And those three things are the defining factor for success in the world. One, we're never taught about how to understand our own mind and self. And we don't even know what that means, to be honest. Second, we're not taught anything about relationships, defining factor of our life. Relationships with our family, other people, our network, our clients, how to create, how to build long term relationships, how to amplify them. Third, financial literacy. We have no idea how
Mm.
that works out in the world. So you go through a whole education system, you're not taught about yourself, about other people, and about how to create financial literacy. And then you're wondering why you constantly are stuck. That's what I felt like when
It
I left
is
school.
very true. And it's crazy when you look at it like that. The most important things. And then going back to, you said about relationships. Well, a simple thing, your relationship with money. You're so correct. It's not taught in schools. And these are the most important things, I feel, to know thyself, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I love the fact that you just said there, because like my daughter has been diagnosed with autism and ADHD, and the
Mm.
doctor suggested that I had ADHD too, which I took on board as a, oh yeah, okay, that can make sense with my past life, but that's okay. It's my superpower. I suppose it's how we perceive it. Yeah, because I know I'm great at this and this, and I know I don't like doing that and that. But when people own it, it's like disease, isn't it? They get given a diagnosis and they totally own it, take ownership of it. And I think that's what does the damage rather than seeing it as, okay, I temporarily am dealing with this thing, or even with these self diagnoses of these mental health. It's okay, I am in this way, and my strengths are XYZ. And maybe I'm now more aware of my weaknesses, but you can find a way to overcome that.
For sure. So, what you're describing is an awareness process. Now, most people are not taught to have that. The only way you can own your strengths and weaknesses or any of that is for us to recognize that, oh, you know what? We need to take responsibility for who we are. And what makes it worse, first of all, we're not taught, especially in the Western world. If you look at US, Canada, people are, there's this heightened sense of being a victim. Everybody's a
Mm.
victim these days. We're a victim to the political climate, the economy. We're a big victim to our past. We're victims to how we're treated. I'm not saying there aren't any victims. I come from a world where my parents had to take literally their clothes and leave and had to illegally go into the next country. But to be honest, when I watched my parents, I never saw victims. They actually owned
Mm.
their challenges. They did their best. They never complained and said, "Oh, this person did this to me." They would complain about circumstances and other things. Yeah, there was war. There's this country came and did this and that. But those were bigger themes. But in their personal life, they took responsibility for how they were. And even if they didn't have a deeper level of awareness, they did their best to move forward. But to be honest, that culture is kind of lost, and there's this sense of powerlessness that's given to people where they cannot even own their own things. And going back to self-diagnosing, a lot of people, the challenge is never what has happened to you. The challenge is how you react to it, how you deal
Mm.
with it, how you process it, how you make sense of it, and eventually, like you're saying, leverage it. You might look at your ADHD as a superpower, but another person is completely incapacitated by that. And that's just a difference of lens, but that's a powerful difference. And most people are not taught that. And even those who are quote unquote in the personal development and growth world, and it's everything is surface. We live in the world of social media, we live in how other people are doing. So it looks like people have their stuff together. I guarantee you everybody's dealing with battles that they're not sharing, and the culture doesn't allow it either because everything has to be polished. I mean, right now I'm talking to you dealing with anxiety. I'm dealing with an immense amount of load. We lost an important family member. We had to, we were in Florida. We had to kind of emergency come back here. The logistical nightmare with that. We're expecting a new baby, which is a
Oh
happy
my
thing, but it's
goodness.
happening right in the middle of a grief period. And there are business challenges. There are all kinds of challenges everybody is going through. I generally consider myself a happy person, but there's a load of emotions that I'm dealing with right now. I'm not saying I'm unhappy. I'm at peace with myself, but I wouldn't call myself the most upbeat person every day. I try to be for everybody else, but that's not real. And I try to share that with my clients, anybody I come across. But that's not how real people act these days. Real people, you should have your shit together, appear like you should have your shit together. And I'll connect it back to self diagnosing. So, most people, when they self diagnose, when they say I have anxiety, what they're really looking for, if you really dig deeper, what they're looking for is some kind of acknowledgement, or in extreme cases, which is for most people, they're looking to be seen as somebody to be taken care of, like a victim. And that becomes a part of their identity. It doesn't matter if they're entrepreneurs or otherwise, will carry that label. I have anxiety, I have this, I have that. And then that becomes who they are in a sense. And they
Mm,
stop doing something because their own mind doesn't allow them to do anything. Because, like you said, if they're not owning it and not seeing it for what it is, how could they do anything about it? Because now it becomes something that they're powerless to. And that is not how I've lived my life. That is not how I've overcome adversity. That is not how I've dealt with all the challenges and continue to deal with challenges. That is not what I've seen anybody in the world, to be honest, to deal with challenges. The our power comes when we start to recognize that no matter what we have, whether it's a physical disability, mental challenge, anxiety, or whatever is going in the world, look at that straight and say, what part of this can I own? Whatever it is, and what am I supposed to be doing with it? And if you just say that, you admitted that part, and then that starts the process of growth. And then the next steps
mm,
might be, do I have the awareness, the knowledge, the skill sets to deal with this? You either do or you don't, because if you don't, you won't be able to deal with it. Then there's vulnerability and humility comes that, oh, if I don't know how to do this, where can I get help? And thank God we live in a world where there's a lot of help available for everybody, for everything. And that is a beautiful thing in the interconnected world we're in. We have access to things that most people even a couple of decades ago couldn't imagine. We can get help from around the world for a lot of things, but people haven't even admitted the first part. So if you're listening to this and you say that I have a challenge, I'm overridden by anxiety, which is amplified right now with the political climate, with the economic situation, and I don't know how to deal with it, reach out, find help. Sometimes that help is in your neighborhood with your friends, family. Sometimes that help us beyond that. You need to find a network. You need to find people who have been able to deal with it. And to be honest, I've run a business for the past decade. The economy was very different up until now. You know what I've done since COVID over the past few years? Like, who has run a business for 30 years plus? I need to
mm.
understand how they did that because I don't understand because it was an entrepreneur who said this that if you haven't been able to make money the past decade before the shift in economy, you're a monkey. Well, of course, it's not that easy to build a business in any economy, but if you don't know how to make money in the downturn, you
Mm.
don't know how to run a business because downturns and upturns in economy, those are normal cycles you go through, just like seasons, just like the adversity and happy times in your life. You need to learn how to deal with that. If you're dealing with the anxiety and you don't know what to do, get help. That's what I've done in the past few years is find out who has run better businesses, who's been able to overcome, what are the principles, what are the perspectives that help them survive and grow within these times. And that required me to face the fact that I don't know what I'm doing here. I'll have to learn. Not only that, I'm helping other entrepreneurs as well. So if I don't know, how can I help them with that process?
Amazing. And because what is the outcome? At the end of the day, if people understood and they did reach out to someone like yourself to help them deal with this anxiety, what is the outcome? What is the big transformation that they will find when they do deal with this or when they do something about it?
So the way my process works, at least, and I train other coaches as well, but I think any coach who has done this work long enough, they develop a sort of art around it. It's very personal to them. I've developed my own process based on my own experience, but also studying all sorts of other people, coaches, and some of my practices might not make sense to other people, but I know that it creates results because I have a track record around that. And usually, the way I approach it, pretty much all my programs are a 1 year commitment with some exceptions. If I do in person events, or sometimes I do these short bursts of 4 or 5 sessions that I do with people just to get them started, or I do these workshops every 6 weeks for free, and I'm running one. I think it's next week. I'm doing a workshop. It's completely free for public. Anybody in my network can join me. I help them just with 2.5 hour session, completely free, and they see the power of it. But essentially, all my programs are 1 year commitment, and that 1 year, I don't just deal with the symptoms. What I want people to understand is who they are deep down. If they cannot understand who they are, at least at the first level of beyond what other people think of them, beyond the identities they've created based on expectations, beyond all the models and stuff they've created in their mind about who they are. And most of it is complete garbage, over 90% of it. If I can't get them deeper to that level, they don't know how to operate as an individual. They're operating through what Carl Jung called this collective mind. And that process is a while because you're peeling off layers. There's a story of Michelangelo was asked, how did you create this statue of David? And it's a famous story. A lot of people can picture it as, I didn't create David. I just chipped off everything that was covering David. And I love that kind of metaphor.
Analogy,
Is there's a lot of stuff we are covered with, and it's not physical, and that's the problem. Because if it was physical, it'd be like, get this shit off. But because it's mental, we don't realize how many layers of our mind is influenced by our past, the thoughts and beliefs and expectations that have developed in our thought processes and our identity. We carry that with us, sometimes in the form of emotions, sometimes a mix of thoughts and emotions, sometimes in the form of a real identity that we think who we are is that, but we're not. And that unlayering process takes a while. And as I'm unlayering that, I'm also helping people create a new vision for their life based on who they really are. And then now they start to build systems and processes that feel completely different. They might change a few things here and there, but those small changes amount to something completely powerful. This is why as soon as within the first 3 to 6 months, a lot of my clients will completely move to a different place. They will make their relationships much better, or they will completely get rid of a lot of the relationships there. And I don't tell them to do that. That's their own realization. They will start a new business, or they will completely shift the business. Like this, it looks like dramatic changes. I didn't tell them to do that. It's an internal realization that they need to shift their life by a lot. And as the unlayering happens, then the next level is that vision that I talked about. And the next level is, okay, based on this new identity, what is the system? And for human beings, the system is our habits of thinking, our habits of feeling, our habits of connecting. We have tiny little habits, hundreds of thousands of them that run every day without our awareness. That's why it's a part of our subconscious mind. We've built them over years, and they run our life, and we think, what's wrong? Because we keep going back to the same patterns. Unless those patterns are interrupted, new patterns are set up. And if you don't know who you are, you cannot build that. So goals don't work in this area. All the tools in the world will not work because you're using the right tools, but you're layering it over the person that you're not. And if you can't go to who you are inside, it doesn't matter what tools you use. It doesn't matter what books you read. It doesn't matter what systems you use. You will feel a void. You will feel empty. You'll feel disconnected, unfulfilled. You'll feel like something needs to change for me to become something or be happy. And you will try to seek different things. Sometimes entrepreneurs do this very well. They'll start a business. They get excited. They'll start another business. And they'll start another business. What are they seeking? They'll start a relationship and it's, this is not fulfilling. They will do something else. They'll start a routine. They're constantly shifting and moving. Why are they doing that? Because they're actually not grounded into something that's important, powerful. It's not connected to their long-term purpose, long-term vision. It's not connected to who they're becoming. None of that stuff, because we're not taught. And I don't think people are dumb when it comes to these things. They're just not taught. Like I wasn't taught. I had to learn this process. I got out of university, and when I was becoming more and more miserable, it was showing up in my marriage. I had a successful career path, but why was I so miserable? And I realized I actually have not been taught to live. I have not been taught to create. I've not been taught to connect with myself and others. The most important thing is to live a quality of life and pass it on to the next generation, to create a better family community. None of those elements are a part of anything that we do. So why would you feel fulfilled?
Because too many people are doing things that they think they should do. Or what the teacher told them, this is what you should go into. And they're not living life that is in full alignment with what they truly desire. And I think that you're so right. That is such a big part of it, is down to not learning this stuff in school. But so for entrepreneurs, they can come to you and help deal with this, peel back the onions and get to the root, their core values, their absolute innermost desire so that they can build back up from that. That's what I'm getting from you. So what do you think? What do you think stops people from even admitting this to themselves or reaching out for help? Because we are terrible. We can be terrible like that. And they don't realize that their whole lives can change if they actually do. So, what do you think's stopping people?
Yeah. And I'll start with myself because I don't want people to feel like I'm pointing at them because I've gone through this journey myself. I didn't ask for help for years. And in the beginning, I didn't even know how to ask for help, to be honest. I didn't even know what help would look like. So the first thing to know is that if you're trying to do anything, there are millions of other people who have dealt with it. You might feel isolated. You might feel like you're the only person. I remember the first time I went to this conference, there were 700 people from 47 different countries there. It was the first ever of that kind of conference I had ever gone to. And most of my life, I grew up knowing that most people around me are not like me. And that didn't feel good. A lot of people think, oh, you must feel unique. I felt the worst ever because I felt not normal. I felt not accepted, not supported. I felt like I was an outcast, a black sheep. It was funny. We were in a train in Scotland with my wife right after COVID. It was a funny observation. My wife looks out, there's a farmland there, and there was a black sheep there. And she looks at that, she's like, hey, look, you're there. Of course, now I look at it differently. I laughed. I'm like, yeah. But growing up, that didn't feel good. That felt painful. And it took me close to 20, 30 years to realize that I needed help. I didn't even know I needed help. More than likely, if you're struggling, you need help. Stop trying to do it alone. You're going to spend another decade or two trying to figure this out, if ever. Most people don't even figure it out in their deathbed. And it's not worth it because it doesn't just affect you, it affects the people around you. If you have a family, whatever you're not aware of, you'll pass it on. And painfully, parents are aware of this painfully. I have kids, even the things that I'm aware of and I can't control yet, I'm passing it on and I know it. And I hate it, but I'm like, that's my journey. It has nothing to do with them. And I'm passing on the good and the bad, whatever I am. You're passing it on to your kids, to your siblings, to your friends, to the team members in your organization. This is how human beings work if you're not dealing with your crap. First of all, the acknowledgement that you might need support. Second, if you have gotten support and it hasn't worked, then the next level is you look at what you're taking, going back to that ownership that we talked about. What part of it you're owning, what part of it you're on. Because a lot of people go through some kind of support that we're like, oh, this person didn't help me at all. And no matter what program I'm going through, whoever helps me with anything, my philosophy, my principle is that I'm going to own my own growth. I'm going to leverage the good and the bad in this person, in this organization, in this system, and I'll take whatever I can and I use it. I don't hold other people responsible. Of course, there are bad programs. Of course, there are people who don't mean well, but you leverage whatever you can. Have you taken ownership of that change for yourself? Most people don't. And if you haven't, then it's time to look at that. Take a closer look at what you're owning and what you're not owning. Third, if you own it, you're going to start to make changes. If you don't, then the next step is go seek a different kind of help. And this time, think through what kind of support you need, because now you know what worked and what didn't work. And so there's steps that people go through, but we can't even get past the first step of seeking help. And to be honest, I can almost assume that most people watching this need support, but they haven't asked for it because it's painful, it's uncomfortable. It's to say that I need help because we've all been raised to, how have you been raised in schools? Don't cheat. We call collaboration cheating. And I laugh at that because there's nothing in the real world where you don't look at resources and other people. You get to look at everything. It's still not easy to build things. But in school, you're sitting there, oh, is there something wrong with me?
So true. So true.
That's how we're trained. And that's just one example of that. We're trained in weird ways in a theoretical world that doesn't apply in the real world. Our parents have been trained like that a lot of times. So they don't even know what the hell they're passing half the time. The amount of crap that I realized that I was thinking, and I continue to think sometimes that I'm working through, it takes a lot of energy to work through it. And to be honest, at a point I realized it will take me a lifetime to figure this out. I need to get support here. I need to get help. And so that's
the shortcut. Take the shortcut. So for the listeners out there, what would be the next logical step for them?
Mm.
What should the listeners do next if they are in this state and they realize that they do need help?
There are certain things that are really powerful about human beings, which I think the way the world is set up nowadays, think about it. We carry this beautiful device that gives us, I can run my whole business with this. It's a powerful computer, but we carry it everywhere. Yeah, I was on a coaching call and I said something. I was like, I know you guys carry your phone into the washroom because I do. Somebody put in the chat, like, TMI, too much information. But we're uncomfortable with admitting things that we all do. So what happens when you have this thing with you at all times? You're constantly fed information. Your mind constantly has an input. So the whole world is trying to, including this podcast, telling you what to do. Now, I don't have a problem with no information that you can use, turn into knowledge. That's not a problem, but we live in the world of information. It's overload of information. I think it was this author talked about this, forget the book right now, but the way he put it is that we consume more information in a day compared to someone in the Middle Ages in a whole year.
I can imagine.
So we don't actually understand the effect of it on our mind. We know that it cannot be all positive.
No.
It's like an overload and downloading a bunch of stuff on your computer, and it's buffering. Most people are buffering. And the reason for that is they don't give themselves enough space. So if you hear anything in here, give yourself space to be, to think, to not have anything. No music, no podcasts, even though you're listening to a podcast, no books, no audiobooks. Give yourself at least 30 minutes of day, sit with your own thoughts. By the way, that's called meditation. Most people think meditation is sitting there and breathing, and those are techniques. Meditation is simply sit there, not do anything, and here's what you'll find. You will be very uncomfortable with that. And there's a quote I love. It was from like 1700s or something. I forget the name of the guy, but said that most of the problem that a man has can be solved by sitting 30 minutes, being able to sit for 30 minutes in a room without doing anything. And this is a long time ago. Now we don't even have 2 minutes without other people's thoughts. So we're constantly bombarded with information. We haven't made sense of our own thoughts and emotions, haven't processed it, even though a lot of people will claim that they have. Most people do not have enough space. So for example, I drive to the gym. Nowadays, my routine is it's about a 14-minute drive to the gym. And my instinct is, let me listen to this audiobook. Let me listen because I love learning. But I force myself to not listen to anything. I don't even listen to music anymore. As much as I like listening to that stuff, I give myself space because those are the few times where I have just with my own thoughts. I do listen to audiobooks when I'm working out, but I give myself at least 30 minutes to 1 hour of complete quietness and every day. So what does that do? That helps me process my own thoughts. That helps me know what's going on. That doesn't overload. Most people don't know what their own thoughts are. So start with that. Give yourself some space, at least 30 minutes every day. It's not easy. It'll be uncomfortable, but you will know what you're struggling with. And you will know what your problems are. You will know what to seek help with. If you don't have that time, you will go for the next months and years, and before you know it, 10 years will pass by. And this is the most common thing that I hear from my clients. I don't even know why I did this. I built this business. I don't even know why I'm with this person. I don't even know why I've been on this path. I don't even know how I got here. And that's not a surprise to me because people run their life based on what they see around them.
Absolutely. So how do people work with you? What would be the next step to come into your world? What should the listeners do next?
So here's how I operate. I actually don't want people to work with me. I can't work with everybody. I'm one person, and my business is not scaled to a point where I can take hundreds of people. I work with a select set of people. I work with either individuals, one-on-one, or in small groups. I like small group settings because we can do a lot, whether those are in person, online. I do different versions of them. And the way I work is that as soon as you come into my ecosystem, you will get a bunch of stuff from me. You get to decide whether or not it will serve you or not. So before you even get on a call with me, you will get exposed to a bunch of stuff, whether that's through my trainings, workshops. They're completely free. You don't have to buy anything from me. If you feel aligned, you will get on a call with me. That might be a very small investment. And there, I'll decide if I'm the right fit for you, you're the right fit for me, because I don't think that every coach is the right fit for a client.
Mm.
And if I can serve you, I'll help you. If I can't, I'll connect you with the right people or resources. I have a wide network of coaches I've worked with. Now I train other coaches globally. And so I can definitely help you at least get connected to other people. But it starts from my website, faisalensaun.com. You can just go, you can see my name right there. And one of the first things you will see is a PDF you can download, and you can work through that. I usually do a workshop every 6 weeks. Join me there, and you will see whether or not I can help you.
Fantastic. And Faisal's details will also be in the show notes. So if you didn't quite catch that, resort back to the show notes. So look, thank you so much for spending so much of your time today talking with me. It's been absolutely fascinating. I love this kind of stuff. And to the listeners, after the break, after the ads, I will be back with why 90% of coaches fail to launch a podcast that actually gets an ROI. I'll be back after the break. Bye for now. So I'm back. Why 90% of coaches fail to launch a podcast that gets an ROI. Now, let's be real for a second. Podcasting sounds sexy when you're just talking about it. You picture yourself sitting down with a nice mic, a fresh cup of coffee, sharing your wisdom with the world. You're vibing in your zone of genius, maybe even imagining thousands of listeners tuning in every week, hanging on your every word, DMing you for coaching spots or business collabs, right? Sounds like a dream. And honestly, it can be. But here's the truth that most people don't tell you. 90% of coaches never make it past episode 3. Yeah, 3 episodes. That is it. And of the 10% who do push through and keep going, 90% of them, they don't make it past episode 20. That means only about 1% of coaches, that's 1 out of every 100, are actually following through in a way that creates real traction, impact, or return on investment. So what is going on? Why do so many good, smart, heart-driven coaches fall off the podcast train before it gets rolling? And it's not because they don't care. It's not because they don't have anything valuable to say. And it's definitely not because they're not willing to do the work. Most of the time, it comes down to just 4 key reasons. And if I'm being honest with you, I've personally hit all 4 of these walls at different stages of my own podcasting journey. So no judgment here. Let's break them down. Number 1, no clarity or vision. This is probably the biggest dream killer of all. Most coaches jump into podcasting with a vague idea of getting their message out there. And sure, that sounds good in theory, but without a clear direction, your podcast turns into a nice idea that doesn't actually do anything for your business. Been there. And here's what actually happens. Coaches launch with excitement. They buy the mic. They come up with a cute name. They record an intro and maybe an episode or 2. And then crickets. Because they're not actually sure what the podcast is for. They're not sure who they're talking to, what transformation they're offering, or how it ties back to their bigger vision. So the podcast just becomes a glorified PR stunt. They post on Instagram, new episode out now. But if you click play, you have no idea who this is for or what they're offering. Here's what your listener needs to know within the first 30 seconds. Who is this podcast for? Why should they care? And what do you help them achieve? If that's not crystal clear, people will tune out because they won't feel like it's for them. And no clarity means no connection. No connection means you got it, no conversions. Number 2, misalignment with business goals. Now, this is a sneaky one because it can feel like you're doing all the right things. You're showing up. You're creating content. You're pouring your heart into it. But then you look up a few months later and think, wait, why hasn't this translated into clients or calls or any cash flow? And it's usually because there's a disconnect between the content you're creating and the goals that you're trying to reach. For an example, You're a mindset coach who wants to attract women in burnout, but your podcast is full of marketing tips. Or you're a fitness coach who wants to build a group program, but your episodes sound like random motivational speeches that don't really lead anywhere. Your podcast isn't a hobby. It's a business growth tool. That means every episode should be intentionally designed to serve your audience and move them closer to working with you. So ask yourself this: is this content aligned with where I'm taking my business in the next 3 to 6 months? Does it naturally lead into my offers, conversations, or my ecosystem? If not, it's time to recalibrate. I've recalibrated. Number 3, lack of consistency and structure. So let's be honest, as coaches, we're already wearing a lot of different hats. You're doing client calls, content creation, back-end admin, showing up on social media, planning launches. Oh, and also trying to be a human with a life, friends, and family. So when you throw podcasting on top of that without any support system, it becomes just one more thing on your overflowing to-do list. At first, it's fun, then it becomes a chore, and eventually, it becomes a ghost town. So here's the deal. I mean, it's not really about how often you publish, it's about how consistently you show up with value, clarity, and strategy. So that's where structure comes in. When you have a clear format, a repeatable workflow, and systems that support you behind the scenes, your podcast becomes sustainable. You don't have to drop weekly episodes forever. You just need to be intentional, strategic, and consistent enough to stay top of mind and build trust over time. And number 4, failure to connect with your ideal audience. Now, this one does hurt a little, but it's true. Most coaches start podcasting to serve everyone, and they end up resonating with no one. They make their content too broad. They use big, vague words like alignment or success or healing without getting specific about the pain points their audience is actually struggling with. So here's the thing: your ideal client needs to hear themselves in your content. They need to feel like you see them. If you want your podcast to actually convert, you have to stop speaking in generalities and start speaking your dream client's language. Call out their fears, speak to their secret frustrations, paint a picture of the transformation that they want, and then show them how you help them get there. When you do that, your podcast stops being just content and starts becoming a client magnet. So what's the shift? The shift happens when you get crystal clear, not just about where you're headed in business, but how your podcast helps you get there. You use your episodes to attract dream clients and prime them to work with you. You build authority without burning yourself out on Instagram 24/7. You create a platform that keeps working for you while you coach, sleep, go on holiday, or launch something new. Your podcast becomes your pre-sale machine. It educates, it nurtures, and qualifies leads before they even book a call. It opens doors, it builds relationships, it gets you invited onto other stages, other podcasts, and collaborations. And here's the best part: it doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be purposeful. So don't launch a podcast just because everyone's doing it. Launch one because you have a message that matters, because you're building something bigger than just a brand, because you want to attract, connect, and convert without chasing. So start with a vision, back it up with a strategy, and let your podcast become the tool that does the heavy lifting for your business. So if you've been thinking about launching, but it seems overwhelming, you can get instant access to my free on-demand workshop, which is called Your Six-Figure Podcast Blueprint. As it says in the outro, podcastprofitsunleashed.com/free. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode on the Podcast Profits Unleashed podcast. If you're a coach, consultant, therapist, or healer who would like to drive sales whilst having fun podcasting, head over to podcastprofitsunleashed.com/free and find out how you can turn your podcast into a sales machine. We'll see you on the next episode.